The dust-choked horizon offered no mercy as Travis Morgan gazed at the wooden stake marking the new boundary of what had once been his family's ranch. Blood from his split knuckles dripped onto the parched earth, evidence of a fight he'd decisively lost, both with his fists and in the county clerk's office. He'd been a fool to trust Jackson Harlow, and now 5 generations of Morgan's sweat and sacrifice had been stolen with the stroke of a crooked judge's pen. The year was 1885, and in Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, a man without land was hardly a man at all. Travis tugged his hat lower against the late afternoon sun, turning his back on the stake that now proclaimed the land as property of Western Frontier Holdings. His horse, Drifter, snorted impatiently, as if urging him to accept the harsh reality and move on. The stately chestnut gelding was perhaps the only valuable thing Travis still possessed, along with his father's Colt revolver and the clothes on his back. "I know, boy," Travis murmured, patting Drifter's neck before climbing into the saddle. "But we ain't finished here, not by a long shot." As he rode toward town, memories threatened to overwhelm him, his grandfather's stories of clearing the land, his father teaching him to mend fences, his mother's garden that flourished despite the harsh climate. 28 years of life, all rooted in soil that was no longer his. The sharp pain in his ribs, courtesy of Harlow's thugs, served as a fresh reminder of how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. The swindler had slowly ingratiated himself, offering investment opportunities that seemed legitimate. Travis had signed papers he didn't fully understand, desperate to modernize the struggling ranch after 3 years of drought had depleted their cattle herd and savings. By the time he realized Harlow's game, it was too late. The forged loan documents, the bribed judge, the false witnesses, it was a scheme as old as the territory itself. And Travis, eager to prove himself after his father's passing last year, had walked right into it. The main street of Cottonwood Springs appeared ahead, a collection of wooden storefronts and dusty thoroughfares that had grown considerably in recent years, as the railroad's approach promised prosperity. Travis steered Drifter toward the modest boarding house where he'd secured a room, another humiliation, sleeping under a stranger's roof after a lifetime in his family home. The sound of piano music drifted from the Silver Dollar Saloon as he dismounted. Despite his circumstances, his stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since dawn. Whatever meager funds remained would need to last until he figured out his next move, but he needed sustenance to think clearly. Travis secured Drifter at the hitching post and pushed through the batwing doors of the establishment. The familiar scents of whiskey, tobacco, and sweat enveloped him as he made his way to the bar, ignoring the sidelong glances from townsfolk who'd already heard of his downfall. "Whiskey," he said to the barkeep, placing a coin on the counter. "And whatever food you're serving. Stew's all we got left," the man replied, sliding a glass toward Travis. "That'll do." As Travis waited, he became aware of a commotion near the rear of the saloon. A woman's voice, clear and authoritative, cut through the ambient noise. "I said remove your hand, sir. I won't repeat myself." Travis turned to see a slender woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a simple blue dress and stood with remarkable composure despite the unwanted attention of a red-faced cattle buyer Travis recognized from previous business in town. "Come now, darlin'," the man slurred, just being friendly to the newcomer. The woman's expression remained impassive. "Your idea of friendly differs from mine." When the man's hand moved toward her arm again, she swiftly sidestepped and, in a fluid motion that suggested practice, appended his whiskey into his lap. Gasps and laughter erupted around them. "Why, you little—" the man lunged forward, but his intoxication made him clumsy. Travis moved without thinking, stepping between them and catching the man's wrist mid-swing. "The lady made herself clear," Travis said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make the drunk wince. "I suggest you find somewhere else to be friendly." For a tense moment, the cattle buyer seemed ready to escalate the confrontation, but something in Travis's eyes, perhaps the look of a man with nothing left to lose, made him reconsider. "Ain't worth my time anyway," he muttered, yanking his arm free and stumbling toward the door. Travis turned to the woman, who was straightening her cuffs with dignified calm. "I appreciate the assistance, though I had the situation in hand," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. Her eyes, he noticed, were an unusual shade of green, like sage after rainfall. "No doubt you did, madam," Travis replied with a slight nod. "But my mother taught me better than to stand by while a lady is accosted." A small smile touched her lips. "Lilah Matthews," she said, extending her hand in a surprisingly forthright manner. "I've recently arrived to take up a position at the schoolhouse. Travis Morgan." He shook her hand, noting her firm grip. "Though I'm afraid you've caught me at a disadvantage regarding my usual introduction. As the Morgan of Morgan Creek Ranch," she asked, her expression softening slightly. "I've heard, news travels quickly in small towns." Travis felt his jaw tighten. "Former Morgan of Morgan Creek Ranch," he corrected. "Thanks to some creative paperwork and a judge who's suddenly building a new house." Lilah's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Corruption is disappointingly universal. I witnessed plenty of it in Boston, though perhaps with more polish and fewer spurs." The barkeep called Travis's attention, sliding a bowl of stew across the counter. Travis hesitated, then gestured to an empty table. "Would you care to join me, Miss Matthews? Least I can do after you provided the evening's entertainment." She considered him for a moment, then nodded. "I would. And perhaps you might tell me more about this situation with your ranch. I find that injustice fascinates me, particularly the possibility of correcting it." Over the simple meal, Travis found himself recounting the details of Harlow's scheme. Lilah listened attentively, occasionally asking surprisingly astute questions about the legal aspects of the transactions. "So this Harlow presented himself as an investor looking to help modernize your operation," she clarified. Travis nodded grimly. "Said he'd seen potential in our land that we weren't maximizing. With the drought, we were struggling to keep our cattle fed. He talked about irrigation systems. New breeding stock painted quite a picture." He stabbed at a piece of meat in the stew. "What he didn't mention was that the papers I signed weren't for an investment partnership, but a high-interest loan with the ranch as collateral. And when you couldn't meet the terms of this loan, you never actually agreed to. He foreclosed, had the sheriff deliver the notice last week. Judge Franklin signed the order without even a proper hearing." Travis took a long drink of his whiskey. "By the time I gathered evidence of the forgery, Harlow had paid off 3 witnesses to swear they saw me agree to the terms." Lilah's expression remained thoughtful rather than pitying, which Travis found unexpectedly refreshing. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Fight," he said simply. "Not sure how yet, but I'm not leaving my family's legacy in that snake's hands." "A commendable stance," she replied, studying him. "Though fighting alone against men who don't respect the law presents considerable challenges." Travis shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time odds were stacked against me." As they finished their meal, the saloon grew more crowded and boisterous. Lilah glanced at the ornate clock above the bar. "I should return to my lodgings," she said, rising from her chair. "Mrs. Abernathy runs a respectable boarding house and has firm views on appropriate hours for young ladies." "I'll walk you," Travis offered. "Town's changed some in recent years. Not all the newcomers understand Western hospitality." Outside, the evening air had cooled considerably, stars beginning to dot the vast Arizona sky. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Lilah spoke. "I appreciate you sharing your story, Mr. Morgan. Perhaps our paths will cross again. Seems likely in a town this size," Travis replied, "though I'm not certain how long I'll remain without the ranch." He let the sentence hang unfinished. They reached the neat white boarding house at the end of the street, its windows glowing with warm lamplight. Lilah turned to him on the bottom porch step. "For what it's worth, Mr. Morgan, I've found that sometimes what appears to be an ending is merely a different beginning." Her voice held a certainty that suggested personal experience. "Good night." Travis tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Matthews." As he walked back toward his own lodgings, Travis found himself reflecting on the unexpected encounter. There was something different about Lilah Matthews, a steadiness and intelligence that stood out in Cottonwood Springs. He dismissed the thought almost immediately. His focus needed to remain on reclaiming his ranch, not on a schoolteacher with intriguing eyes, no matter how refreshingly direct she might be. The following morning dawned clear and hot, typical for late June. Travis rose early, his body accustomed to ranch schedules despite his change in circumstances. After a simple breakfast at the town's cafe, he made his way to the law office of Harold Wilson, the only attorney in Cottonwood Springs who hadn't been in Harlow's pocket. Wilson, a gray-haired man with spectacles perpetually perched on the end of his nose, listened to Travis's account with growing concern. "I sympathize with your situation, Morgan, truly I do," Wilson said when Travis finished. "Your family has been part of this territory's backbone since before most folks here could spell Arizona, but Harlow's covered his tracks well. The documents bear your signature forged," Travis interjected. "So you claim, and I believe you. But Judge Franklin has already ruled on the matter, and proving forgery would require expert testimony that simply isn't available in this county. Not to mention the 3 witnesses who have sworn otherwise." Travis leaned forward. "Paid witnesses. Surely that counts for something." Wilson removed his spectacles, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It would if we could prove it, but again, that requires evidence. So I'm supposed to simply accept that everything my family built has been stolen." Travis felt the anger rising in his chest again. "I didn't say that," Wilson replied carefully. "I'm merely outlining the legal challenges. There might be alternative approaches worth considering." Travis narrowed his eyes. "Such as? Harlow acquired your ranch as part of a larger plan. He's been buying up water rights and strategic properties throughout the county. Word is, he's working with the railroad to develop a new spur line and township." Wilson leaned back in his chair. "Men like that are playing a long game. Sometimes the best strategy is to disrupt their timeline." "How do I do that when he has the law on his side?" Wilson's expression turned grave. "I'm an officer of the court, Morgan. I can't advise anything outside legal channels." He paused meaningfully. "But I can tell you that Harlow's success depends on keeping his investors happy. Those investors are coming to tour the properties next week. If they were to see complications with their investment, they might reconsider their partnership." Travis understood the implication. Disrupt Harlow's plans, create enough problems to scare off his financial backers. It wasn't the legal remedy he'd hoped for, but it was something. "I appreciate your time, Mr. Wilson," Travis said, rising from his chair. "One more thing," Wilson added, replacing his spectacles. "Be careful. Harlow didn't come to Cottonwood Springs by accident. He's had his eye on this region for years, and he didn't get where he is by being forgiving to those who stand in his way." The warning followed Travis as he exited the law office into the bright morning sunlight. His mind was already working through possibilities when a familiar voice caught his attention. "Mr. Morgan, good morning." Lilah Matthews stood a few yards away, a basket over one arm and a parasol shielding her from the harsh sun. Today she wore a practical brown dress, her hair again neatly arranged, though a few tendrils had escaped in the morning breeze. "Miss Matthews," he acknowledged with a nod. "You're abroad early." "School preparations," she explained, gesturing to the basket, which Travis now noticed contained books and papers. "The previous teacher left rather abruptly, and I'm attempting to restore some order before classes resume next week." Travis fell into step beside her as she continued toward the small schoolhouse at the edge of town. Brave woman, taking on the education of Cottonwood Springs youth. Some of these ranch children could probably teach you a thing or two about wildness. A smile played at her lips. "I've taught in a Boston orphanage school for the past 5 years, Mr. Morgan. I assure you, city children with nothing to lose can match any frontier child for inventive mischief." "Fair point," he conceded. "What brings a Boston schoolteacher all the way to Arizona territory?" Something flickered across her expression, a momentary guardedness. "A desire for change, new horizons," she glanced at him. "And yourself? Have you decided on your next steps regarding your situation?" Travis hesitated, uncertain how much to share with this relative stranger. Yet something about her directness invited honesty. "I'm exploring options," he said finally, "though they're limited when facing men who have rigged the game." "Games can be unrigged," Lilah observed. or new games can be invented with different rules entirely. They reached the schoolhouse, a simple one-room structure with a small bell tower. Travis took the heavy basket from her arm as she unlocked the door. "You speak as if you have experience in such matters," he noted, following her inside. The interior was dusty and disorganized, with books scattered and desks arranged haphazardly. Lilah took the basket back, setting it on the teacher's desk. "Let's say I understand that justice sometimes requires creativity." She surveyed the classroom with a practical eye. "Particularly when traditional avenues are blocked by those with influence." Travis studied her with growing curiosity. "You're not quite what I expected in a schoolteacher, Miss Matthews. People rarely are exactly what we expect, Mr. Morgan." She began organizing books on a shelf. "For instance, I suspect there's more to you than a cattleman who lost a bad deal." "Is that so?" He leaned against a desk, crossing his arms. "And what do you see beyond that?" Her green eyes met his directly. "A man calculating his next move rather than wallowing in defeat. Someone whose connection to this land goes deeper than legal ownership." She tilted her head slightly. "Am I mistaken?" "No," Travis admitted, surprised by her perception, "though I'm not sure what good that does me with Harlow holding the deed." "Deeds can change hands," she said simply, turning back to her books. "As can circumstances." Travis found himself increasingly intrigued by this woman who spoke with such quiet confidence about matters most would consider hopeless. "You sound like you might have suggestions on the matter." "Perhaps," Lilah paused in her organizing, "but first, I'd be grateful for some assistance with these shelves. In exchange, I have a proposition that might interest you." For the next hour, Travis helped restore order to the classroom. They worked well together, falling into an efficient rhythm without unnecessary conversation. He found himself appreciating Lilah's practical approach and clear vision for the space. As they finished arranging the final row of desks, Lilah dusted her hands on her skirt and gestured for Travis to join her on the small porch outside. The view stretched across the valley toward what had once been Morgan Creek Ranch. From this distance, Travis could make out the white farmhouse where he'd grown up, now occupied by Harlow's caretakers. "What would you say," Lilah began carefully, "if I told you I have some experience with men like Harlow and possibly a way to help you reclaim what's rightfully yours?" Travis turned to her, skepticism mingling with curiosity. "I'd wonder what interest a schoolteacher from Boston has in a ranch dispute in Arizona territory." A fair question. Lilah's gaze remained on the distant landscape. "Let's say that before I became a teacher, I witnessed firsthand how men of wealth and position can manipulate systems meant to protect ordinary people. And that I developed certain skills in response." "Skills?" Travis prompted when she didn't elaborate. Lilah finally looked at him directly. "Mr. Morgan, are you familiar with the concept of confidence schemes?" Travis blinked, momentarily taken aback. "You're suggesting I'm suggesting nothing illegal," she interrupted smoothly. "Merely that sometimes, to recover what was dishonestly taken, one must employ similarly creative methods." Travis studied her with new eyes, trying to reconcile the composed schoolteacher with the woman now essentially proposing to con a con man. "Who are you really, Lilah Matthews?" A small smile touched her lips. "Exactly who I presented myself to be, a qualified teacher with excellent references, here to educate the children of Cottonwood Springs." She paused. "But before that, I was someone who learned through bitter experience how wealth and power can crush those without either. My father was ruined by men like Harlow. And now you what travel around righting such wrongs." Travis couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Hardly so dramatic," she replied. "I came here genuinely seeking a fresh start, but when I heard about your situation..." She shrugged slightly. "Let's say I recognized the pattern." Travis turned back to the view, his mind racing. The proposition was dangerous, possibly illegal, and definitely not what he'd expected from a prim schoolteacher. Yet the alternative was accepting defeat, walking away from generations of his family's work. What exactly would this creative approach involve? He asked finally. "First, information," Lilah said, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. We need to understand exactly what Harlow plans for your land and who his investors are. Then we create a situation where continuing his arrangement becomes untenable for him, not for you." "And you've done this before?" "Yes." Her answer was simple but confident. Travis considered her carefully. "Why help me? You don't know me." "I know enough," Lilah replied. "I know you didn't deserve what happened. I know your family built something honorable here." She paused. "And I know that men like Harlow don't stop. Today it's your ranch. Tomorrow it will be someone else's livelihood." The conviction in her voice resonated with something inside Travis. For the first time since losing the ranch, he felt a flicker of genuine hope. "All right, Miss Matthews," he said finally. "I'm listening." The following days established an unexpected partnership between Travis and Lilah. By day, she continued preparing the schoolhouse and establishing herself as the town's new teacher, making acquaintances and building her reputation for competence and propriety. Travis, meanwhile, took odd jobs around town, presenting the image of a man accepting his losses and trying to rebuild. But in the evenings, they met at various discreet locations to share information and develop their plan. Travis was consistently impressed by Lilah's strategic thinking and attention to detail. She had a remarkable ability to identify vulnerabilities in Harlow's operation that Travis, despite his local knowledge, had overlooked. "Harlow's entire scheme depends on the railroad connection," Lilah explained during one of their meetings in the back room of Wilson's law office. "His investors are expecting a significant return when the new spur line creates a boom in property values." Travis nodded, studying the county map they'd spread on the table. "But the railroad hasn't finalized the route yet." "Precisely." Lilah's finger traced an alternative path on the map. "Harlow has promised his investors that the line will run through the northeast section of what was your property, creating a perfect location for a new township development. That's why your ranch was so valuable to him. It controls both water access and the natural pass through the foothills." "But if the railroad were to choose a different route?" Travis began, seeing where her thinking led. "Their entire investment becomes significantly less valuable," Lilah confirmed, "especially if the alternative route favored land owned by a different party." Wilson, who had cautiously agreed to assist them, cleared his throat. "The Railroad Commission is sending a survey team next week. They're considering 2 possible routes through the county. And I'm guessing Harlow has already arranged to influence their decision," Travis said grimly. "Undoubtedly," Lilah agreed. "But influence can work both ways. We need to make the alternative route more attractive and Harlow's proposed path problematic." As they refined their approach, Travis found himself increasingly drawn to Lilah. Behind her proper schoolteacher facade lay a mind that was quick, strategic, and surprisingly versed in the art of manipulation. During their planning sessions, she revealed glimpses of her past: a father who'd been a successful merchant in Boston until a group of investors systematically destroyed him, and a younger Lilah who'd learned to navigate high society while secretly studying its weaknesses. "They never see women clearly," she told him one evening as they walked along the creek that gave his ranch its name. "We're either decorative or domestic in their eyes, never dangerous. It's a significant advantage." "I don't think anyone who truly knows you would make that mistake," Travis replied, noticing how the setting sun caught the auburn highlights in her hair. She glanced at him with a small smile. "You'd be surprised how blind men can be to what's before them. How is your side, by the way?" she asked, changing the subject. "That bruise looked painful yesterday." Travis instinctively touched his ribs, which still ached from his encounter with Harlow's men. "Healing, nothing broken. You shouldn't have confronted them directly," she chided gently. "Our approach requires patience." "Patience isn't my strong suit when I see them mismanaging my father's horses," he admitted. The altercation had been brief but heated when Travis discovered Harlow's caretakers neglecting the special breeding stock his father had developed. "We'll get them back," Lilah assured him, her hand briefly touching his arm. "But not if you get yourself arrested for assault first." The touch, though fleeting, lingered in Travis's awareness. He'd begun to notice a shift in their interactions, moments of unexpected connection, amid their strategic planning. Sometimes, he would catch her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, and he found himself looking for excuses to prolong their meetings. The day before the railroad surveyors were due to arrive, their plan was ready. Through careful investigation and Wilson's legal contacts, they had uncovered critical information. Harlow's investors were already nervous about certain aspects of the development, and the lead railroad surveyor had a reputation for principled independence, despite the usual attempts to influence him. "Tomorrow, everything needs to appear coincidental," Lilah reminded Travis as they finalized details in her small room at the boarding house. Mrs. Abernathy, surprisingly, had proven sympathetic to their cause after learning of Harlow's methods, and had bent her rules to allow Travis brief visits for what she called strategic discussions. "I understand my part," Travis assured her, reviewing the documents they had prepared evidence of potential complications with Harlow's proposed route, including geological surveys suggesting instability that Wilson had helped them obtain. "And you're clear on the timing," Lilah pressed. "You need to encounter Chief Surveyor Richmond casually, not appear to be seeking him out. At the Silver Dollar around 7, when he typically takes his evening meal," Travis confirmed. "Just a chance meeting between two men who share an interest in the territory's development." Lilah nodded, satisfied. "Meanwhile, I'll ensure Mrs. Harlow receives my letter expressing concerns about student safety with the proposed railroad route so near the school." Travis raised an eyebrow. "You really think she'll oppose her husband?" "Publicly, no," Lilah replied. "But Alina Harlow wields considerable influence in their private discussions. She's also genuinely concerned about community welfare. Unlike her husband, the seed of doubt may be all we need." The complexity of their plan reflected weeks of careful observation and information gathering. They had identified not only Harlow's vulnerabilities, but also the network of relationships and interests that could be subtly leveraged against him. "It's still a long shot," Travis said quietly. "Even if we convince the railroad to choose the southern route, Harlow still holds the deed to my ranch." Lilah's expression turned determined. "One problem at a time, Mr. Morgan. If his investors see their potential profits diminishing, they'll become less patient with his promises. That's when we implement the second phase." Travis studied her as she gathered their papers, struck again by the contrast between her appearance and her capabilities. "You know, for someone who claims to value honesty in education, you're remarkably skilled at deception." Lilah paused, meeting his gaze directly. "There's a difference between deception and justice, Travis. I don't create falsehoods, I merely arrange for the truth to become visible when it's most inconvenient for those who prefer it hidden." Her use of his first name, rare in their interactions, emphasized her sincerity. "And after this is over," he asked, a question that had been increasingly on his mind. "You return to being simply the town's schoolteacher." Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, perhaps. "That was always my intention in coming here, a quiet life away from—" She didn't finish the thought. "Away from what?" Travis pressed gently. Lilah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There was a situation in Boston. A powerful man who didn't appreciate some truths being revealed about his business practices. My departure was expedient. You were in danger," Travis realized. "Let's say my continued presence in Boston became untenable," she replied carefully. "Cottonwood Springs offered distance and a genuine opportunity to use my teaching skills. And then you met me and got pulled back into exactly the kind of situation you were escaping," Travis said, feeling a pang of guilt. "I made my choice," Lilah corrected him firmly. "Some injustices can't be ignored, even in pursuit of a quieter life." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Travis became acutely aware of the small space between them in the modest room. The late afternoon light cast a warm glow across her features, softening her usual composed expression. "I should go," he said finally, breaking the moment. "Early start tomorrow." Lilah nodded, stepping back. "Indeed, everything depends on precise timing." As Travis left the boarding house, he found himself dwelling not on the details of their plan, but on the woman herself. Beneath her carefully constructed exterior, Lilah Matthews was unlike anyone he'd ever known, principled yet pragmatic, refined yet resourceful. The realization that she might leave once their plan concluded troubled him more than he wanted to admit. The following day unfolded according to their careful orchestration. Travis happened to encounter Chief Surveyor Richmond at the Silver Dollar, engaging him in conversation about regional development. Meanwhile, Lilah delivered her letter of concern to Eleanor Harlow during a Women's Charitable Society meeting, appealing to her interest in children's welfare. By midday, word had spread through town that the survey team was seriously reconsidering the northern route due to previously overlooked geological concerns. Travis, watching from a distance as Harlow arrived in town with his investors for what was supposed to be a triumphant tour, saw the businessman's confident facade crack upon receiving the news. "It's working," Travis murmured to Lilah when they briefly crossed paths near the general store. Harlow's practically purple with rage. "Perfect," she replied without breaking stride. "Wilson delivered the historical water rights documentation to the survey team an hour ago. They're now aware that Harlow's proposed development might face legal challenges over water access." The day progressed with mounting tension as Harlow attempted to salvage his presentation to the investors. Travis and Lilah maintained their distance from each other, each playing their role in what she had termed a carefully choreographed dance of coincidences. By evening, the results exceeded their expectations. The Railroad Commission announced they would recommend the southern route as the most practical option, citing multiple factors that Lilah and Travis had strategically brought to their attention. Harlow's investors, already concerned by delays, began questioning the viability of the development without the railroad connection. Travis observed the aftermath from his position at the bar of the Silver Dollar, where Harlow was attempting to reassure his increasingly skeptical financial backers. The strain was evident on the swindler's face as his carefully constructed plans began to unravel. "This setback is temporary," Harlow insisted to the group of well-dressed men at his table. "There are other advantages to the property that remain valuable regardless of the railroad's decision." "Without the transportation link, the development timeline extends significantly," one investor countered. "Our capital would be tied up for years longer than projected. Not to mention the water access concerns that have suddenly emerged," another added pointedly. "You assured us all legal matters were resolved, Harlow." Travis hid his satisfaction behind his whiskey glass. The seeds of doubt they had planted were taking root faster than anticipated. Phase 1 of their plan had succeeded. Now it was time for Phase 2. He finished his drink and slipped out of the saloon, making his way to the agreed meeting point behind Wilson's office. Lilah was already waiting, her expression animated with controlled excitement. "It couldn't have gone better," she told him as they entered through the back door. Richmond's decision completely undermined Harlow's presentation. "The investors are already discussing pulling out." Wilson looked up from his desk, where he'd been reviewing documents. "Indeed. And I've received word that the bank in Prescott is reconsidering Harlow's loan applications in light of these developments. His cash position may be more precarious than he lets on. Which makes this the perfect time to apply additional pressure," Lilah said, laying out a new set of papers on the desk. "I've prepared the notice challenging the validity of his ownership based on the forged documents. With the evidence Travis's former ranch hand provided about the witnesses being paid, we have grounds for a formal petition." Wilson examined the documents with a professional eye. "It's still thin without proving the forgery itself, but given the current circumstances, it might be enough to further rattle Harlow and his backers." Travis studied the legal language, impressed again by Lilah's thoroughness. "Will Judge Franklin even consider this? He's firmly in Harlow's pocket." "Judge Franklin has been called to Prescott for a territorial court matter," Wilson informed them with a slight smile. "The petition will be reviewed by Judge Hollister from the neighboring county, a man known for his particular attention to procedural details." Travis exchanged a look with Lilah. "You arranged this too," she shook her head. "Merely fortunate timing." though I may have mentioned certain irregularities in Franklin's recent rulings to a territorial official who was passing through last week. The three of them worked late into the evening, refining the petition and preparing supporting documentation. As the clock approached midnight, Wilson gathered the papers with a yawn. "I'll file these first thing in the morning," he promised. "You two should get some rest. Tomorrow may bring significant developments." Outside, the night was clear and cool, stars brilliantly visible above the small town. Travis walked beside Lilah toward her boarding house, both tired but energized by the day's progress. "You're remarkable," he said after they had walked in companionable silence for a while. "I never would have managed any of this without you." Lilah glanced at him, her expression softened by the moonlight. "You underestimate yourself, Travis. Your knowledge of the land, the people, your determination to fight rather than walk away. Those qualities matter as much as any strategy." They stopped at the corner where they would need to part ways, Lilah to her boarding house, Travis to his rented room above the livery. "When this is over," Travis said, the question that had been hovering in his mind finally finding voice, "what will you do?" Lilah's gaze shifted to the distant mountains, barely visible in the darkness. "Continue teaching, I suppose. It's why I came here after all." "At the risk of presumption," Travis began carefully, "I've been thinking that Morgan Creek Ranch could benefit from someone with your intelligence and perspective. Once it's restored to its rightful ownership, of course." Lilah turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "Are you offering me a position, Mr. Morgan?" "I'm suggesting a partnership," he clarified, suddenly finding it difficult to maintain his usual directness. "Of a personal nature, eventually, perhaps." A small smile played at her lips. "That's quite an imprecise proposal from a man usually so straightforward." Travis took a breath, gathering his courage. "Lilah, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've never met anyone like you. When I get my ranch back, and I believe now that I'd like you to consider staying, not just in Cottonwood Springs, but with me." In the moonlight, he could see color rise in her cheeks. "Travis, you should know that my past is complicated. There are reasons beyond professional opportunity that brought me west. I don't care about your past," he said simply. "I care about who you are now, who we might be together." Lilah studied him for a long moment. "You might want better than someone with my history," she said softly. Travis shook his head, reaching for her hand. "I already got it," he replied, the words coming naturally. "I found you." Something in her expression shifted, a vulnerability breaking through her usual composure. Without overthinking, Travis stepped closer and gently touched her cheek. When she didn't pull away, he leaned down and kissed her, a gentle question rather than a demand. Lilah hesitated only briefly before responding, her hand coming to rest on his shoulder as the kiss deepened. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, her usual self-possession had given way to genuine emotion. "That was not part of our strategic planning," she said with a small laugh. "Some things can't be planned," Travis replied, still holding her hand. "But I'd like to see where this might lead, after we've dealt with Harlow." Lilah's smile turned determined again. "Yes, first we reclaim what's yours, then we can discuss potential partnerships." The following morning brought chaos to Cottonwood Springs. Travis awoke to pounding on his door and found Wilson standing there, looking both disheveled and exhilarated. "Harlow's investors pulled out," the lawyer announced without preamble. "All of them. Apparently there was a confrontation late last night after we left the saloon. One investor discovered the others were getting preferential terms and the whole arrangement collapsed." Travis quickly pulled on his boots. "That wasn't part of our plan." "Sometimes fortune favors the bold," Wilson replied, "but there's more. Judge Hollister received our petition this morning and immediately issued a temporary stay on any transfer or development of the property pending investigation." "That's fantastic," Travis said, grabbing his hat. "Where's Lilah? She should hear this." Wilson's expression sobered. "That's the other reason I'm here. Harlow knows. Someone must have talked. He confronted Miss Matthews outside the schoolhouse not 30 minutes ago, making quite a scene, accused her of conspiracy and threatened legal action." Travis felt his blood run cold. "Is she all right?" "Physically, yes." Sheriff Thompson intervened before it escalated further. but Harlow was explicit about ruining her reputation and having her teaching credentials revoked. Wilson adjusted his spectacles nervously. He also mentioned something about contacting authorities in Boston regarding outstanding matters. Travis was already moving, pulling on his coat. "Where is she now?" "Mrs. Abernathy's, I believe." "But Travis," Wilson called after him, "tread carefully. Harlow's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." Travis moved through town at a barely restrained run, his mind racing with concern. If Harlow had discovered Lilah's involvement, he might well follow through on his threats. The man had connections far beyond Cottonwood Springs. Mrs. Abernathy met him at the door of the boarding house, her normally stern expression creased with worry. "She's packing," the older woman said without preamble. "Says she needs to leave immediately. I told her it's foolishness to run, but she's insistent." "May I speak with her?" Travis asked. Mrs. Abernathy hesitated, then nodded. "Second door on the right." "But mind your manners, this is still a respectable establishment." Travis took the stairs 2 at a time, knocking firmly on Lilah's door. "Mrs. Abernathy, I've told you I must." Lilah's voice cut off as she opened the door and saw Travis. She was indeed in the midst of packing, her clothing hastily folded into a traveling case on the bed. "You can't leave," Travis said immediately, stepping into the room despite propriety. Lilah turned back to her packing. "I have to. Harlow knows about Boston. If he telegraphs the authorities there." "What authorities? What happened in Boston, Lilah?" Travis moved to stand beside her. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." She stilled, her hands resting on a neatly folded shirtwaist. "I told you my father was ruined by investors. What I didn't tell you was that afterward, when we were destitute, I found ways to recover what had been taken from us." Travis frowned. "You stole from them." "I exposed their schemes," she corrected, finally looking at him. "I used what I'd learned of their methods to turn their own partners against them. But in the process, certain documents were reappropriated from private offices, evidence of their crimes but obtained by illegal means. So you're wanted for theft in Boston." "For theft, fraud, and what they termed criminal conspiracy against commercial interests. Powerful men create powerful charges when women challenge them." Her voice was steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I changed my name and came west when it became clear they would see me imprisoned regardless of the justice of my actions." Travis absorbed this revelation, finding that it altered nothing about his feelings for her. "So we'll ensure Harlow can't communicate with Boston," he said simply. Lilah stared at him. "Did you hear what I said? I'm a fugitive, Travis. I heard that you fought injustice, paid a price for it, and continued fighting it here." He took her hands in his. "That only confirms what I already knew about your character." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not that simple. If Harlow exposes me, Harlow has problems of his own," Travis interrupted gently. "Wilson says his investors have abandoned him, and Judge Hollister has frozen any action on my ranch pending investigation. We're winning, Lilah." Hope flickered across her face. "Truly." "Truly. But if we run now, Harlow recovers. We need to see this through together." He squeezed her hands. "I meant what I said last night. Whatever comes, we face it as a team." Lilah took a deep breath, visibly steadying herself. "You're right. Running solved nothing in Boston. It won't solve anything here." She glanced at her half-packed case. "But we need to move quickly. Harlow will be desperate now." They developed a new plan on the spot, adapting to the changed circumstances. If Harlow was now aware of their efforts, they needed to be more direct. With Wilson's help, they would bring the evidence of forgery and witness tampering directly to Judge Hollister, while ensuring Harlow couldn't flee with whatever funds remained from his failed scheme. As they hastened toward Wilson's office, however, they were intercepted by Sheriff Thompson. The lawman's expression was grave as he approached. "Miss Matthews, Mr. Morgan," he acknowledged. "I need to speak with you both immediately, privately." They followed him to his office, exchanging concerned glances. Once inside, Thompson closed the door firmly and turned to face them. "I've just received a disturbing telegram from the Territorial Marshal's office," he began without preamble. "Apparently, Mr. Harlow sent an urgent message to Prescott this morning with some rather specific allegations about both of you." Lilah paled slightly, but maintained her composure. What sort of allegations, Sheriff? Criminal conspiracy, fraud, interfering with commerce, and in your case, Miss Matthews, questions about your true identity and background. Thompson's weathered face revealed little. Now, I've known the Morgan family my entire life, and I've found you to be a positive addition to our community, Miss Matthews. But I need to understand what's happening here. Travis stepped forward. Sheriff, Harlow obtained my ranch through documented fraud. We have evidence, which should have been brought to me, Thompson interrupted firmly. Not handled through private machinations, no matter how justified you felt. With respect, Sheriff, Lilah said carefully, our experience suggested that official channels might be compromised, given Judge Franklin's relationship with Mr. Harlow. Thompson's expression softened slightly. Franklin's always been too fond of prosperous friendships, I'll grant you that, but circumventing the law, even to correct an injustice, places you on dangerous ground. What does the marshal intend to do? Travis asked directly. That's just it, Thompson replied, moving to sit behind his desk. The marshal's response was unexpected. It seems Mr. Harlow himself is subject to outstanding warrants in Colorado territory for similar schemes conducted there 2 years ago. His message inadvertently alerted authorities to his whereabouts. Lilah and Travis exchanged surprised glances. So Harlow is wanted elsewhere for the same crimes, Lilah clarified. Thompson nodded. The marshal is dispatching deputies to bring him in. They'll arrive by tomorrow's train. He fixed them both with a stern look. Which gives us time to sort out this local matter properly through legal channels. I want all your evidence, everything you've gathered, on my desk within the hour. Judge Hollister has agreed to hold an emergency hearing this afternoon. Relief washed over Travis. Thank you, Sheriff. We'll bring everything immediately. As they left the sheriff's office, Lilah's usual composure returned. A rather unexpected development, she observed. Harlow's desperation may have triggered his own downfall. Poetic justice, Travis agreed, but we're not finished yet. They spent the next hour organizing their evidence with Wilson's help, creating a clear timeline of Harlow's deception. By the time they presented their case to Sheriff Thompson, they had assembled a compelling account of the fraud perpetrated against Travis and the Morgan family legacy. The emergency hearing before Judge Hollister exceeded even their hopes. The judge, a meticulous man with no ties to Cottonwood Springs' internal politics, reviewed the evidence carefully. When Harlow attempted to counter with accusations about Lilah's background, Hollister dismissed them as irrelevant to the matter at hand. This court is concerned solely with the validity of the transfer of Morgan Creek Ranch, the judge declared firmly. And the evidence of impropriety in that transaction appears substantial. By sunset, Judge Hollister had issued a preliminary ruling. The transfer of Morgan Creek Ranch to Harlow's company was suspended pending full investigation, and the property would be placed in trust under the court's supervision until ownership could be definitively determined. It wasn't complete victory, but it was a crucial first step. As they left the courthouse, Travis felt as if a crushing weight had begun to lift from his shoulders. Beside him, Lilah's expression held cautious optimism. The marshal's deputies will take Harlow into custody tomorrow, she noted as they walked toward the Silver Dollar, where the town was already buzzing with gossip about the day's events. Once he's gone, completing the case against him should be straightforward. Travis nodded, reaching for her hand without thinking. She allowed the contact, her fingers twining with his naturally. And what about you? He asked quietly. Are your concerns about Boston resolved? Lilah's pace slowed slightly. Not entirely, but Harlow's credibility is thoroughly damaged now. Any accusations he makes will be viewed with appropriate skepticism. She glanced at him. I may need to address my past eventually, but not immediately. When you do, Travis said firmly, you won't face it alone. Their entrance to the Silver Dollar created a momentary lull in conversation before the room erupted in supportive calls and raised glasses. News of Harlow's imminent arrest and the restoration of the Morgan property had spread quickly, and the townspeople's response made clear where their sympathies lay. To Travis Morgan, called Old Pete Dawson from his regular table, standing up to Eastern money men who think they can buy our town." Cheers followed, and Travis acknowledged them with a nod, though his focus remained on Lilah, who stood somewhat uncomfortably amid the attention. For someone accustomed to operating in the background, the public recognition clearly unsettled her. "Perhaps we should find somewhere quieter," he suggested. They slipped out and made their way to the creek that had given his ranch its name. In the gathering dusk, with the first stars appearing overhead, they sat on a fallen log overlooking the water. "So what happens now?" Lilah asked after a comfortable silence. "Once your ranch is restored," Travis looked out over the land that had been his family's legacy for generations. "Rebuild what Harlow's neglect has damaged. Restore the breeding program my father started. Create something lasting." He turned to her. "But I meant what I said before. I want you to be part of that future, Lilah, if you're willing." She studied him in the fading light. "You hardly know me, Travis." "I know enough," he countered, echoing her words from days earlier. "I know you're brilliant, principled, and braver than anyone I've met. I know we work well together." He took her hand again. "And I know that when I kiss you, it feels like something I want to keep doing for a very long time." A smile touched her lips. "That's hardly a practical basis for a life partnership." "Maybe not," Travis admitted. "But it's a start. The rest we can figure out together day by day." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you still have your heart set on being Cottonwood Springs schoolteacher." Lilah's expression turned thoughtful. "I do enjoy teaching. But perhaps I could teach in a different capacity, educating ranch children who can't make it to town, or even establishing a small school on Morgan Creek property for neighboring families." "You've given this some thought," Travis noted, pleased. "I've considered possibilities," she acknowledged. "Though I wasn't certain you would still want me involved once you reclaimed your ranch." Travis shifted to face her directly. "Lilah, I don't just want you involved with the ranch. I want you in my life completely. I know it's fast and perhaps presumptuous given how recently we met," but she stopped his words with a kiss, surprising them both with her boldness. When she pulled back, her eyes held certainty. "Sometimes, Mr. Morgan, the right decision doesn't require extended deliberation." The following weeks brought the resolution they had worked toward. Harlow was taken into custody by the territorial marshal's deputies, facing charges not only in Colorado, but now in Arizona territory as well. With his removal, the full extent of his fraudulent activities became clear, strengthening Travis's case for reclaiming his property. Judge Hollister, after reviewing all evidence, ruled decisively. The transfer of Morgan Creek Ranch had been obtained through proven fraud and forgery, rendering it null and void. Ownership was restored to Travis Morgan, with provisions for recovering damages from Harlow's seized assets. Returning to the ranch was a moment of profound emotion for Travis. The white farmhouse needed repairs after Harlow's caretaker's negligence, the fences required mending, and the cattle herd had diminished. But the land remained as it had always been, resilient, promising home. Lilah stood beside him on the porch, surveying the property with practical assessment rather than sentiment. "The north pasture should be our first priority," she noted. "With proper irrigation, we could double its productivity by next season." Travis smiled at her use of "we," the casual certainty with which she had incorporated herself into the ranch's future. "The house needs attention first," he countered. "Can't have you living with a leaky roof and drafty windows." She raised an eyebrow. "I've endured far worse accommodations than a few drafts, Mr. Morgan." "Perhaps," he agreed, "but that doesn't mean you should have to continue doing so." He took her hand, drawing her attention from the landscape to himself. "Especially not as Mrs. Morgan." Lilah's expression softened. "Is that a formal proposal this time?" "It is," Travis confirmed, reaching into his pocket to produce a simple gold ring. It had belonged to his grandmother, kept safe in the bank in Prescott even as he lost nearly everything else. "Lilah Matthews, or whatever your real name might be, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Partner in all things, from rebuilding this ranch to creating a life together." Lilah's composure momentarily faltered, genuine emotion breaking through. "My real name was Elizabeth Prescott," she said quietly, "but I've been Lilah Matthews so long now, it feels more authentic than my birth name ever did." She looked at the ring, then back to him. Yes, Travis Morgan, I will marry you as Lilah Matthews if you'll have me under that name. I'd have you under any name, he assured her, sliding the ring onto her finger. Though I'm partial to the idea of you becoming a Morgan. Their wedding took place that autumn, after the most urgent ranch repairs were completed and the first new cattle purchased. The ceremony in Cottonwood Springs' small church was attended by nearly the entire community, most of whom had come to respect both Travis's determination and Lilah's intelligence during the Harlow affair. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly, declaring she'd known from the first day that Lilah was too spirited for mere teaching. Wilson served as best man, while Eleanor Harlow, who had divorced her husband following his arrest and remained in town, stood as Lilah's matron of honor, an unexpected friendship having developed between the two strong-minded women. As they exchanged vows, Travis found himself reflecting on the strange turns of fortune that had brought them to this moment. Losing his ranch had seemed like the end of everything he valued, yet without that loss, he might never have met the remarkable woman now promising to share his life. I promise to build with you, Lilah said in her clear voice, adding personal words to the traditional vows. Not just a ranch or a home, but a partnership of equals, founded on truth and mutual respect. I promise to value your mind as much as your heart, Travis responded. To create with you a legacy worthy of both our dreams. Their life together began in earnest as winter approached. The ranch slowly regained its former vitality under their combined efforts. Travis's practical knowledge of the land, complemented perfectly by Lilah's strategic thinking and financial acumen. She introduced new accounting methods that revealed opportunities for efficiency Travis had never considered, while he taught her the cycles of the land and the rhythms of ranch life. True to her word, Lilah established a small school in a converted bunkhouse, offering education to children from neighboring ranches who struggled to reach town regularly. Her reputation as a teacher grew, bringing additional income through tuition from more distant families who sent their children to board during the school week. By spring, Morgan Creek Ranch was flourishing again. The breeding program Travis's father had begun was re-established with promising stock. The irrigation systems Harlow had falsely promised were actually implemented under Lilah's careful planning, and the first crops in the newly expanded fields were beginning to emerge. One evening, as they sat on the newly rebuilt porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson, Lilah rested her head against Travis's shoulder. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? She asked. If Harlow hadn't targeted your ranch, or if I hadn't come to Cottonwood Springs? Travis considered the question. I try not to dwell on what might have been, he said finally, but I do sometimes marvel at how losing everything I thought mattered led me to what truly does. He kissed the top of her head, though I might have preferred a less painful path to finding you. Lilah laughed softly. Perhaps, but would you have noticed me if I'd simply been the town's schoolteacher, or would you have been too focused on your cattle and crops to see beyond the ranch? A fair question, Travis admitted. I wasn't exactly seeking a partner before Harlow's scheme forced me to reconsider everything. Then perhaps we owe him a peculiar debt of gratitude, Lilah mused, though I certainly don't regret his current accommodations in territorial prison. Reports from Prescott indicated that Harlow had been sentenced to 15 years for his various frauds across 2 territories. His carefully constructed empire had collapsed entirely, with most of his ill-gotten assets redistributed to his victims through the courts. No, Travis agreed. Justice was served there thanks largely to your efforts. He shifted to look at her directly. Have you heard anything more from Boston? Lilah shook her head. Nothing. I suspect the statute of limitations on my activities may have expired. Or perhaps those I exposed have their own reasons for avoiding renewed scrutiny. She smiled slightly. In any case, Lilah Morgan is well established now, with a respectable husband and position in the community. Respectable might be stretching it, Travis joked. I'm still the cowboy who punched Harlow in the town square when he tried to have you arrested. An entirely gallant response, Lilah assured him, laughter in her voice, though perhaps not strictly necessary given Sheriff Thompson's timely intervention. Their easy banter was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Travis stood, habitually checking that his revolver was accessible, though the territory had grown considerably safer in recent months. The rider proved to be young Jamie Wilson, the lawyer's son, carrying a telegram. "Pa sent this over," he called as he dismounted. "Said it might be important, coming all the way from the governor's office and such." Travis thanked him with a coin and opened the telegram as the boy rode away. His expression shifted from curiosity to surprise as he read the contents. "What is it?" Lilah asked, rising to stand beside him. "The territorial governor is establishing a commission on water rights and land development," Travis explained, handing her the paper. "They're asking me to serve as a representative for ranching interests." Lilah scanned the telegram. "This is a significant opportunity. Your experience with Harlow has made you something of a symbol for standing against corrupt development." "I'm not a politician," Travis protested mildly. "No, you're something more valuable, a man who understands both the land and the threats to it." Lilah's expression was thoughtful. "This commission will help shape territorial policy as Arizona moves toward statehood. You could ensure other families don't face what we did." Travis considered her words. The idea of helping establish fair practices for land and water use held undeniable appeal. His family had always valued stewardship of the land above mere ownership, a principle he hoped to extend to others through this work. "I'd need to travel to Prescott regularly," he noted. "The ranch can be managed in your absence," Lilah finished confidently. "Between myself and the hands we've hired, routine operations would continue smoothly." She smiled. "Besides, I might occasionally accompany you. I've developed some thoughts on educational policy that the territorial superintendent might find interesting." Travis laughed, pulling her close. "Always 3 steps ahead, aren't you? Should I expect to find you running for territorial representative next?" "Hardly," she replied, though her eyes sparkled with consideration. "Women's suffrage hasn't reached Arizona yet, but influencing policy doesn't always require holding office." As they discussed the possibilities the appointment presented, Travis marveled again at how completely his life had transformed. From the despair of losing his birthright to the fulfillment of building something new and potentially more significant with Lilah by his side. It was a journey he could never have anticipated. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the farmhouse that was now truly their home, Lilah paused while brushing her hair, a nightly ritual Travis found endlessly fascinating. "I have news of my own," she said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "I've been waiting for the right moment to share it." Travis moved to stand behind her, their reflected images forming a picture of domestic contentment he sometimes still couldn't believe was his reality. "What news?" Lilah set down the brush and turned to face him, taking his hands and placing them gently on her stomach. "We'll need to prepare the small bedroom down the hall," she said softly. "By winter, Morgan Creek Ranch will have a new resident." Joy spread through Travis like wildfire, momentarily robbing him of words. He pulled Lilah into an embrace, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm before carefully setting her down again. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Quite certain," she confirmed, her own eyes bright with happy tears. "Mrs. Abernathy confirmed it last week when I visited town. She was a midwife before running the boarding house, you know." Travis shook his head in wonder. "A child, our child." "The next generation of Morgans," Lilah agreed. "Though I hope he or she inherits more than just the ranch from us." "Your intelligence," Travis said immediately. "Your courage. Your integrity," Lilah countered. "Your connection to the land." Travis led her to their bed, sitting beside her with their hands still intertwined. "When I told you that you deserved better than a dispossessed rancher with nothing but debts and determination," he said, recalling their early conversations, "you said, 'I already got it,'" Lilah finished, smiling at the memory. "And I meant it then, though I understand it even more deeply now." She touched his face gently. "What we've built together is worth more than any ranch or position. It's a true partnership." In the quiet of their bedroom, with the future expanding before them in ways neither could have imagined a year earlier, Travis kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion their journey together had cultivated. From loss had come renewal, from deception, a deeper truth, from two separate paths, a shared destiny. Outside, the vast Arizona sky spread its canopy of stars over Morgan Creek Ranch. The land that had nearly been lost now thrived under their combined care, promising a legacy for the child they would welcome and the community they continued to build. It was, Travis reflected as he held Lilah close, everything he hadn't known to wish for and exactly what he needed. 8 months later, as the first snow dusted the distant mountains, Lilah Morgan arrived with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined spirit. As Travis held his daughter for the first time, with Lilah exhausted but radiant beside him, he understood with perfect clarity that his greatest fortune had never been the ranch itself, but the woman who had helped him reclaim it and in doing so had given him a far more precious gift, a family and future built on love, respect, and shared purpose. Morgan Creek Ranch continued to prosper under their stewardship, becoming not just a successful cattle operation, but a center for education and progressive ranching practices. Travis's work on the Territorial Commission helped establish water rights protections that benefited generations of Arizona farmers and ranchers, while Lilah's educational initiatives expanded opportunities for rural children throughout the county. And in the years that followed, as Lilah was joined by two brothers, the story of how Travis Morgan lost his ranch only to gain everything that truly mattered became part of family lore, a testament to resilience, justice, and the unexpected paths that sometimes lead to exactly where we're meant to be.